Hi, welcome to Camera Collection. I wanted to do a series about some of the cameras that I have in my collection. The cameras I have are either for a particular purpose or just something I found interesting. Today I'm taking a look at the Mamiya Press Super 23 or Mamiya Super 23 press camera. I came across this one as I was looking into the Dora Goodman project. They take and 3D print cameras, zone focus cameras, and they're using the lenses from these press cameras as part of their camera build. And so I was looking at that and thinking, wow, I really should get a 3D printer. And I came across this and I thought, well, that's a unique looking camera I hadn't come across before. And so in search of a lens, I end up with a camera. Cool. So what I like about this camera is that it is it's got some great glass. So the 100mm lens that it comes with here is a Mamiya Secor 3.5. So relatively fast. It also stops down to a 32. So if I want to shoot some real deep focus landscape stuff, that's really great. But it's using a 6x9 120 film back. I have a lot of 6x6 cameras, and that's traditionally been sort of where I found myself. In this case, I was looking for something a little more landscape. What's really cool about this is that it's kind of a combination of cameras. So in some ways, it acts kind of like a view camera or 4x5 camera. The lens cocking of the shutter and firing kind of feels like a view camera. The back feels like a regular interchangeable back roll-filled camera. And then in between, the focusing system and the framing system is a rangefinder. So I can kind of imagine that it's a hybrid of cameras, which is kind of cool. And it definitely suits my needs doing some landscape stuff. It has an interchangeable lens system, so I can actually remove this lens. It came with a 100mm lens. And I picked up a 50mm lens as a landscape, primarily landscape photographer. I wanted something a little bit wider, and this is pretty much the widest that they come for this particular camera. I think there is a 65, there's a 150 and a 250mm lens that fits on here as well. So the mount's very particular to it, or as I said earlier, the Dora Goodman zone focus cameras. Built into the rangefinder system, it has an adjustment for the 100mm lens, the 150, and the 250mm lens. But if I want something wider like the 50 or 65, I actually have to attach a separate viewfinder. So it goes into the shoe mount on the top here, locks into place. Now, the focusing mechanism inside the camera still functions and is connected or linked to the 50mm lens. So I can make adjustments to the focus, or it's at least telling me what the focus is, and then I dial that in to my accessory viewfinder here. So this one is particularly made for the 50mm. Now, if you're out looking for a wider lens like the 65 or the 50, make sure that you get one that's paired with the viewing system. Otherwise, you'll be basically framing up even more blind than you actually are. I guess that's one of the downsides I find to this camera is that, you know, as a rangefinder, I'm getting some lines that are approximately that frame. But it's inevitable if I frame up a shot and then I find, oh, look at that light post or that tree branch sneaking into the frame. But, you know, those are some of the downsides we might have. The back, as I said, is removable, so I can take this back off and actually replace it with other types of backs, or I believe there is a ground glass available if I wanted to do some fine-tuned focusing. The camera itself does allow you to expand out and actually shoot using a macro or close focus system, much like a 4x5 camera would be. So the features of the camera kind of lend itself to being a little bit more thoughtful about the images that you make with it. And what I mean by that is that it's actually kind of a tricky little camera to use if you're not thinking about it. So when we pick up a rangefinder camera, we focus with it and fire the shot. And that maybe is something that you could do with this camera, but it's, again, something I want to definitely think about. One, I can cock the shutter and fire the shutter and I haven't taken a photograph. As a typical roll film back, there is a dark slide, so if I remove the dark slide, I'm now ready to expose that piece of film, and that's great. The other thing I need to be methodical about is actually advancing the film. So there's no connection between, hey, I fired a shot and it's time to advance the film. If you've used some other roll film back cameras, like a Hasselblad, or perhaps an RB67, then you'll find that after you fired the shutter, hey, it's time to advance the film, and it won't allow you to make another exposure until you've done so. This camera's a little bit different, and it's, in a sense, very manual, in that I can fire a frame and not get a picture because of the dark slide. I have to take the dark slide out, I fire the picture. Now, after I've done that, I want to make sure that I advance the film. So there's a little switch here, or a little lever that says, hey, I'm ready to advance, and then I can advance this a couple of times, and then my counter moves up and I get another piece of film ready to shoot. One of the things that I have done accidentally with this camera is I've forgotten to advance the film after I take a frame. And so what happens there is I get a second exposure on top of the first exposure, so a double exposure in camera. So you want to make sure and watch out for that if that was not your intention. Other things that I've done is framed up the shot and fired it and advanced the film, but then realized I forgot to take the dark slide out. So there's no rewinding of the film. Unfortunately, you just burned a piece of film. As a 6x9 camera, I only get 8 frames per roll of film. I have used this more as a rangefinder camera, trying to get some candid portraits. I have mostly used this in a landscape mode. Most recently, I was using this camera to play around with some long exposures with water. Here are some examples that I shot with the Mamiya Super 23. I hope you enjoyed them, and please come back again to check out some of my other cameras.